Hey guys, how's it going? This is Dave Sebastian with Greenhouse Graphics and Wayside Youth and Family. I am the coordinator of Mentoring Arts Programming, and I am coming to you live from the Shirley Home Studio. Today I am working on some collages, a collage as part of the Open Comic Project. That is Pound the Open Comic. On Instagram, I have done about 79 collages so far. It's been going really well, and I've had a great time. I've gotten a lot of hits and a lot of feedback on the project, and it's really something I've enjoyed doing. So I think that I wanted to get on here and share it with you guys. I did one a couple of weeks back. It went really well, so I want to try to do something else. So that's why I'm bringing it to you guys today. We're gonna start like right away, but the first thing I want to do is I just want to tell you guys a little bit about my programs. I work with Wayside in a partnership with the Department of Mental Health. I've been doing this work for about 7 years. My mission is to create and facilitate arts programming throughout the towns of Central Mass. I work with young adults that are between 16 and 26. Excuse me. And we just bring the program out to them where they are as much as I can. That's what I basically do Monday, Tuesday, and Thursdays. Wednesday and Friday, I'm in my basement studio at Tempo Young Adult Resource Center. That's at 68 Henry Street in Framingham. We all work for Wayside, which is a human service agency out of Framingham. They do a number of services for young adults. Tempo is basically a program specifically for for the young adults between 16 and 26. They help with everything from crisis, like homelessness and drug addiction, to just needs. For example, employment, school. But they also do a lot of physical things. For example, there's a washer and dryer there, a computer lab there, a small food kitchen there. These are all designed, obviously, to help young adults stay afloat and deal with the transition, which I find to be difficult, between being a young adult and being an adult. The staff at Tempo are called transitional facilitators, meaning transitioning from being a young adult to being a grown-up. I'm going to turn this graphic across my face off. Sorry about that, you guys. It's always something, you know what I mean? So we're going to start talking about Watchmen. If you guys haven't heard of Watchmen, I will be talking about it in today's stream. Watchmen is a particularly iconic. It happens to me on every live stream. You guys are exhausting me. Watchmen is an incredibly iconic comic that came out in around the mid 80s, and there was a few comics that were coming out around the same time when comics grew up and became what they are today, which is the sort of a wider spectrum of audience. There's always been a lot of adults who've read comics, but now their comics are created specifically for adults, and that's a sea change, So that happened in the 80s. It was between these two books, Watchmen and Dark Knight. Dark Knight's a comic that Frank Miller created about an older Batman. Really iconic, huge hit. Probably one of the most popular comics in modern history. And then Watchmen was more, Dark Knight was a few issues, but Watchmen was a significant effort, 12 issues. So maintaining this, the level of quality for 12 issues was pretty amazing. Now it's Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. We're going to talk a lot about Dave Gibbons because he drew the artwork that we're working with today. Alan Moore, one of the most brilliant writers. Gosh, you guys, I'm just so exhausted. one of the most brilliant comic writers, maybe of all time. He revolutionized the industry with Watchmen, but he basically kept doing it for the bulk of his career, simply creating more and more amazing comics and stories. One of the really interesting things about Alan Moore is that he's a sorcerer. He's a very into like real magic guy, like a Wiccan. It's kind of cool, but also kind of weird. Got to get gloved up. Most of the project collages, I don't wear gloves. This project right now, I'm going to wear gloves because the first part of the collage for me is picking a size that you're going to work on and, getting onto it. And you have to prepare that surface, right? So, whoops. Oh, sorry, guys. Yeah. All right. So this is what we're going to work on right here. This is what I'm going to work on right here. This is a 9x12 Blick artist board, I think. Let me check the label, make sure I don't misquote it. There we go. It is a Blick Premier Artist Panel, 9x12 in a cradled surface, which is a 1.5 inch deep box. I'm going to show you what that looks like. So this is the piece of art, the piece of board that we're going to create our artwork on today, and this is what cradled means. So inside here is a 1.5 inch depth. These are pretty interesting. Number one, I frame the bulk of my collages on boards like this. You know what I mean? So it makes sense that that we would want to have this edge. So if you look at this one, this is on a very thin piece of ampersand art board, gesso board, I believe. So I drop it into this frame, and that's great. But this is roughly the same idea. You know what I mean? Like this is the same, like it's thick on the edge and that kind of stuff. What I like about this as opposed to this is that this you can use artwork to wrap the frame, so you can continue the collage around the edges. I like that. I think that's really, really interesting. So that's why I would work with this instead of this. Alrighty. Sorry about that, guys. I've kind of gotten away from you. Oh, it's because I'm mirroring the wrong camera. Let me get in here. Alrighty. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get this board set up and ready to go. Once we have done that, we will transition over to just a piece of board that isn't what we're going to use, because we'll be able to build the collage on another surface, photograph it, and transition to this one once the paint dries on it. I think I have a 9x12 pad right here that I wanted to use. This one, I think that one might be it. Whoop, sorry guys. Yep. All right, so first thing we're going to do is get this guy black. So how I do that is I use this right here, which is golden high fluid acrylics. It's basically a sort of watery acrylic. It works for me kind of like a marker. I like working with markers quite a bit. I'm sure I've showed everybody, this piece of artwork that I was working on here for a while. This is a Cthulhu, and I created this guy totally using paint markers and some of these paints. So this is the way that I black my stuff. So that's what we're going to do first. And so I usually try to work on the front first. One of the things, obviously this golden high flow acrylics has aftermarket. Well, it's actually Golden makes it too, but this is a dauber top for it, kind of like a bingo marker. So it gives us a lot of black at once. You know what I mean? A pretty good coating. It took me a little while to figure out the best way to coat these boards. Initially, I wanted to use airbrush or spray paint, and you find that both of those give you a transparent coverage, where this guy gives you like hardcore opaque black. So I find this guy is easy to use. These surfaces, which is another thing I really like. The first time I started using collage, I was working on canvas. Now the problem with canvas is that when you push hard on it, it bends, right? So bending is not something we want out of collage. Like we want to be able to, get right into it. The tool I use to roll my collages is this brayer. Now the best way to get to work with it is to, kind of push kind of hard with it, So I found that working on these artist boards, which is a piece of ceramic with gesso mixed into it, baked onto a masonite board. This makes them tough. This makes them, like they have a good life. They're going to be there. You know what I mean? All right. Mostly don't really have to do much more than one coat. That's pretty much what we need to do. Now at the end, there's going to be sections that dry slightly different than other sections, and we're going to have to, fix it. But this initial coat isn't bad. You want to try not to tip it too much. Like you got to tip this marker enough, tip the board enough for the marker to work. But if you tip it too much, then this stuff will leak onto your desk. And one thing you really don't want is to have drip marks down the front. Now, this is me, kind of being a little bit anal, right? Because if we do this job right, you won't even see the front, right? You won't see any of this black. You'll just see the collage. Now, the reason I use black is a lot of the excess, like the panel designs and stuff in comics are in white. So when I cut my piece up, sometimes there's little bits of white along the edge. And so you might miss a section that you didn't collage. One of the big things for me with collage is getting the whole surface covered in collage, so like you've intentionally designed your purpose instead of, kind of shoehorning enough stuff out of a story to fit it in. I'm not going to lie, that has totally happened to me. Like, the board you're using is too big for the amount of source material you have. You just kind of have to muddle through, I did one kind of recently of Underdog. I would show it to you, but it's sold at a Comic-Con. I've only sold a few of the collages, but it's extremely gratifying to sell them at all, since they're really a project about the young adults I work with, and that's to try to teach them something about comics. Many of the young adults I've worked with like anime and manga comics, but few of them are interested in their American cousins. All right, so we basically got this whole guy painted black, all of his edges painted black. So now we got to let that dry. It's fluid acrylic, so it's going to take a bit. So we're just going to slide it over here to the side, which is right here. We got a bunch of space here to dry things. Throw our light on here, just so a little bit of heat on it. Oh, forgot to turn the power strip on. All right, so you throw some light on there so that you can get a little bit of passive heat, you know what I mean? Like nothing. But it's something to try. It's something that you want to, anything you do to speed the process, you know what I mean? Okay, so the next thing is the tools that we're using to do this job. I use a couple of different tools when I'm collaging. Let's see if I can find the other one I like to use. This one. There it is. All right, so what we're going to be working with here is this right here is a vinyl picker. This guy is made for picking sections of vinyl out when you're doing a large vinyl print, like when you're building a stencil or anything like that. So this guy I got is a really cool tool. It's helped me a lot. The only thing with this is if you stick this into a piece of paper, it's hard to get it out. So if you're using this to slide something around, occasionally it can kind of not work out quite as well. But it does have this pointy other end, which I've used a number of times. And then we got this guy. This is a small X-Acto type of blade. It's made by Fiskars. It basically fits on your finger like this, and it kind of stresses a different part of your hand when you're cutting instead of the traditional one, which is this is not a X-Acto, it's another Fiskars, but it works in, you know, the pencil type pose, but after a while these parts of your fingers get really tired. Now this has a great pad on it, totally different from the million years or so I was using regular X-Actos, which are mostly like a metal tube. I can show you. Mostly like a metal tube like this, which is cool and I like it, but after a while, you know, it starts to hurt your fingers. So plus, I don't know, I've just kind of enjoyed this company's products a little bit. So that is what I am using. Back up a little so you guys can see our stuff again. All right. So the next thing that we had to, the other tool we're going to use is the brayer that we mentioned already. This guy is just to roll out any air bubbles. Air bubbles are one of the curses of collaging. Now the good thing is that both Mod Podge and gel medium are self-leveling. So once you get these guys on and they dry, they're going to pull a lot of the bubbles out. Don't go crazy. If you leave ripples in your work, it's going to be rippled. You know, you have a certain amount of time to roll this paper out before it gets saturated with glue and is where it's going to be. So that's something to think about. You know, I wouldn't say that means you have to work fast or anything like that. You just have to work intentionally. You'll see by what we're doing here. So this is the other products that we're going to use. This is matte gel medium and this is Mod Podge. Both of these guys need to be shaken, you know, really good to use them, especially the Mod Podge. The gel medium. Gel medium is acrylic paint without pigment. So it's great as far as it loves paint. It'll stick to the paint we put on that board really well, and it's and I like it. It gives you it has some wiggle time, which is something I say during when I'm collaging, which is a very foolish thing. But when you put the artwork down, you have a chance to sort of like shift it around a little. I can't tell you the number of times I've placed something down, I've just blown the angle by a little bit. And if you blow the angle on one piece, it's compounding. You know, the next piece has to move a little, and another. And finally you wind up with, a negative piece that you didn't intend. So these guys here do that. I used Mod Podge on my first 45 collages. I swapped over to gel medium. From some personal preference, it doesn't dry quite as fast on the surface. Mod Podge works awesome. It's not light fast, which doesn't really matter for my work because it's old pages. They get more yellow and stuff. It's kind of fine. But that's a consideration, you know. So I figured we could control that a little bit, which is to use gel medium to build up the surface and then to use Mod Podge on top of it. I think this is going to work pretty good. You know what I mean? Or has been working pretty good. I've probably done around 40 now with gel medium, and they've been going really fine. So that's the tools that we're going to use in the project today. And then, like I said, we're going to work on this piece of Bristol. Bristol is a great hard surface plate material. What I'm using here is Bristol Smooth by Canson. I also would recommend all of Canson's product. I use their paper for photographic printing. They just make a lot of really, really great products. Now, one of the things that's too bad is that once we paint that thing black, we don't really need the gloves anymore. So I hate to waste them, but this is about the hardest thing you could possibly do with gloves on. Which all I'm going to do here on this page is I'm going to I'm going to tape this canvas down, I'm going to go with whatever word I want to use, okay? Don't judge me. Let's start over. I'm going to tape this piece of Bristol board down just so it doesn't move while I'm collaging. One of the things that are kind of a pain in my method is if anything moves. So if you allow the whole page you're working on to move, it kind of defeats the purpose. You know what I'm saying? All right. So now that guy's taped. I'm not going to cough on it or anything and have it move, which has happened to me more than a few times. You know what I'm saying? Cool. All right. So now we want to take a look at what we want to do for pieces. I have like another really small cutting board I wanted to use, and I can't remember where it is. Okay. One sec. Let me just take a look through here really quick. Those things. Nope. All right. Well, whatever. No problem. All right. So we're just gonna do that again. All right, because first thing I want to do is I want to pull out the artwork that we're going to use. All right. If anyone out there has read Watchmen, write it up in the comments. I'd love to hear from you guys. YouTube doesn't have chat the way Facebook does. I would love to, or Instagram. I would love to talk to you guys, but I just don't have the ability to do so. All right. So these 3 pages here came out of the Watchmen book, but aren't exactly something we really want to use. Now, what's the reason for that? The reason for that is that the character that we're working on is not really represented here in any of these panels. Now, comics are 6 pages, right? These would be 6 pages because it's 3 and 3, right? So we take a look. One of the first things you want to do with this process, which I should have mentioned, I guess, is take the comic completely apart. You go to the center of the book, you find the staples, unbend the staples, and lay the book out as pages. Then you go through it page by page, finding any of the ones that reference the character you want to create the piece out of. This particular comic is the 9-panel standard comic style, very journalistic. This now means that, this layout really means dialogue-based, storyline, kind of theatrical in a little bit of a way, or like TV in a little bit of a way. This is what Dave Gibbons' artwork looks like, hyper-realistic, and really, really cool and interesting. Now you can see right here, this is our character Watchman. This is our character Rorschach. Kind of a Batman character. I will tell you an incredibly boring but quick story about comics. There was a comic company called Charlton that went out of business in the 50s, and they had invented a bunch of their own heroes. I won't bore you with the list. But some of them, like they had a character named Blue Beetle and Booster Gold, they both came over when when DC was purchasing Charlton Comics. Why they wanted Charlton Comics, a company that had gone out of business, is that a writer named Alan Moore had suggested if they bought them, that he could do something with those characters, and he had an idea. Watchmen is totally all based on those Charlton characters. The Owl and the World's Smartest Man, and Rorschach, who was the Question character for Charlton, are just really, underused. I don't know how they were back in the day because I never read Charlton's. But what Alan Moore was able to do is, really just amazing, especially for characters who were basically just going to be thrown away. All right. So these pages here don't tell us much. Don't give us much. There is that small piece of Rorschach, and then he's over here. he's eating some beans in the night owl's kitchen. But that's kind of it as far as these two pages having some Rorschach on them. So we turn each one over and take a look at this side, and you see, same deal. This side doesn't really have anything, any of our Rorschach stuff. Up here was a whole bunch of other pages I took out. There was like a novel that one of the characters is writing about his career. Brilliant that a writer, any writer, would write 12-issue book and a novel at the same time. Let's hear it for that. So there is a significant amount more pages here that I pulled out to look at. So let's take a look at a couple of those. We're going to go through these pages a couple at a time real quick. All right. So here we have another 27 panels to take a look at. Now here, Rorschach is represented significantly, right? In fact, even the color of this page is different from some of the other pages because Rorschach is a very different and dark character. So there's a lot of Rorschach here, especially this large panel up here. So there we go. Oops. So we're going to take this large panel out. These first couple of cuts are really general. You know, you want to take as much as you can, because if you leave a piece, then that's going to be the piece that you totally needed. You know, I don't use words because the collage project is about introducing people to comic art as opposed to writing. I feel like I've gotten a hard time from some writers. Like, what's my problem with writers? I think writers are amazing and brilliant. I just haven't figured out a way to represent them, I suppose. When I am selling comics, trying to sell comics to young adult, not sell them, but the physical idea of comics, I often am discussing the incredible plot. You know, there are artists out there that are very, very talented, and they write and draw. But mostly the comic book artists are beholding to their writer. You know, they came up with a great story. Dave Gibbons is brilliant, and he's written some of his own stuff that's really brilliant, but this is someone else's. So we're going to hold off on these few panels here. These are Rorschach panels. He's climbing down from the roof, but we'll get right back into those. Now this one is a series of Rorschach appearances, so we're going to just take that whole line off. Right. Down here there's a cool, you know, as he walks up to the character panel. Even this one where he's scaring the bartender is kind of fun. Never a problem to have too much material. I've been doing some very large collages, and I love doing them, but they take much longer, and the number of pieces is truly vast. You know, the last large collage I did had about 180 pieces. It's very easy to lose 180 pieces on this tiny desk that I'm working with here. You know, so I wouldn't recommend it. You know. So, you know, there's a lot of individual trim that have to go on in the process of building these things. You know, like a big one is taking all of the borders off. I sometimes keep the borders because, again, if you needed a patch in some spot, it would have to be a patch that matches the color in the rest of the story. So if you just grab a piece of paper, trim it, and glue it there, it's going to be obvious. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to be able to see it. And if that's okay with you, then that's okay with me. But personally, I am trying to have it not only look like I only use the comic, but actually only use the comic. You know, that's what I'm trying to do. So we got this 3-panel about Rorschach there. Got another one, this particular panel right here, where he walks into this bar, is kind of cool. So we're going to keep those, and then we take a look at this panel, this page. This is Rorschach here, and here. But he's facing away from the camera the whole time. So we might use it, but we might not. I apologize for the nudity on this page. This is Dr. Manhattan, and he is not a human. So we're going to hold off on this Rorschach page and see if we can kind of figure out if we need these small panels. Next page we're going to look at is this one. Obviously this one has a big Rorschach appearance right up here in the middle. So these panels here are obviously, Rorschach panels. Another thing I will warn you about is don't stack your stuff. Very easy to trim it in half. Now, can you fix that? Yeah. But you need to, and why create more work for yourself if you can avoid it? You know what I mean? So this one is a story about a dialogue between the Night Owl and Rorschach, but really down here I think is all I'm going to use. So we just take this panel, whoops, don't cut the tip of your glove, that'll hurt. Just take the knife and bring it across right here. And we get this piece that we were making a pile of things we weren't going to use, I think, or possibly not. Actually, I think I should have a possible not pile and a possible yes pile. We'll call this the possible yes pile. And here are all of our, I think I will be using those panels. All right, so now we got the top part of this out. All right. So this is a cool 3-panel watchmen unit. Alright, so we add that to our pile of stuff that we are going to try to use. In here we have these 2 panels of Rorschach here, where he's kind of generally annoyed. This is a really cool scene where he's trying to warn Dr. Manhattan that somebody's trying to kill him. Dr. Manhattan cannot be killed. He's almost like a god. So he's sort of like, well, whatever. And he tosses him out. So while he's talking, he simply appears outside. Kind of a Rorschach moment too. I can't get a break, you know what I mean? So we're going to take out this panel that we need, or may need, right down through the bottom, since that's all Rorschach. A little bit of this side piece here. Things like page numbers and contextual block lettering, narrator discussion, are things that I don't include any words. I try to stay away from the words as much as I can. I used a piece of a title page a lot of times to give credit to the artist who created this work. I think it's important to point out, although my project is other people's artwork, I am very much trying to reinterpret that into my own idea. I am not comparing myself to Andy Warhol, but Andy Warhol went out and appropriated, objects that existed in the lexicon and changed their interpretation to his. And I don't know if he was sued, probably was, but I am not trying to steal anyone's intellectual property. I am trying to manipulate it to the goal to the purpose that I think it should be used for. Or that I want to use it for, because they used it perfectly fine. Now, there's a couple shots of Rorschach here. He's pretty small. So maybe we'll pull these 2 panels out just to say they're part of the maybe used pile. All right. Same thing, just taking out our border white. There we go. I have a paper trimmer I use for this sometimes. It works pretty well. Keep a trash can nearby, because definitely you're going to be creating a significant amount of trash. I guess there's another thing worth mentioning, which is that this is not any kind of collectible comic or anything like that. The only thing I use to do these projects is comics I've found in flea markets or damaged books. I will tell you my motivator for this project originally. One was to teach young adults about comic art and expose them to it without requiring them to have to read it or commit to a larger effort. But also, my comics got damaged by some mice, and many books were destroyed. And I was looking at them and finding that a mouse eating the top edge of a comic is not the end of it, but it's the end of it in a collectible way. So I pulled those out, and I found that although the mice had eaten them, many of them had some brilliant artwork. So maybe I should try to celebrate some of the artists that I really like, since obviously I bought those comics for a purpose. So the first ones I was working on was Jack Kirby. I wanted to celebrate and sort of study Jack Kirby, and share my interpretation of his work with everyone. Now those were pretty aesthetic, hey, here's a comic pieces, and I was using text in those. But as I moved along, I moved away from text and into sort of a new interpretation of the work, and the interpretation is that I'm trying to tell my own story. I'm trying to remove the characters from the context of the story they were placed in and try to tell my own version of it, or a shortened version of the story they were telling. A good example of that is I was doing a large piece from a comic called Sunday Funnies. And this was Paul Pope doing Commandy. Really cool combination of characters. Commandy was a Jack Kirby invention, the last boy on Earth, and Paul Pope is one of my favorite, practically superstar comic book artists. So it was really fun to take those pieces and work on it. But it was 5 issues of the story. It's a 1-page newspaper style story. So it took 5 months worth of the material to create the one large piece. So I wasn't able to tell all the intrinsicies of his story. I was basically just able to tell the sweeping general arc of his work. And by that I mean I was able to show the war aspect of it, but not the interpersonal development. So anyway, that is what happened there. We're going to go back into it. So now we got this panel. This panel is a Rorschach panel, totally. It has its own choices in color. The way he writes and stuff is really, really cool. So we're going to keep all of this, but we still have to break it up so that we can, move it around. Very good drawing of a rat right there. These panels in here don't have a lot of Rorschach, but they have a lot of his method of investigation, which is, sort of stocky. He just wanders around looking through people's windows and figuring out cases. This, like I said, he's built, he's modeled on the character The Question, which is interesting about him is his mask removes all of his features. So he has none. The difference here is that Rorschach has none, but he has this sort of an oil that moves around on his face. So that his face looks different kind of all the time. There we go. go. All right, so we got another. Well, I guess that only this middle piece is really relevant here on the bottom. But we'll keep them. They are all parts, panels starring the Rorschach character. Here we have these pieces. Again, the stocky one. All right. Right. All right. Very difficult to keep your workspace clean when this is the artwork that you're doing. I produce an honestly foolish amount of waste every day. All right, take our white panels off of it, white edge off of this one. Never hesitate to turn your work, because I used to think I should just cut and not move the artwork. And we're all different in how much force our wrists can give in a given direction. So make sure you're loading the deck in your favor. No point making it harder on you. What I like about this project is that it lets me create kind of in a vacuum. Nobody's around. Tell me what they think. This page here is about Rorschach discovering the secret of the victim in the story. Of course, it's a murder investigation. He's investigating the death of a man named Blake, who happens to be one of the other superheroes in a team called the Watchmen. I'm not sure Rorschach was in that group too, but Dr. Manhattan was, Night Owl, the world's smartest man, his name is Adrian Voigt. And they were the book is about that old team, like we were talking about the Charlton characters. If you guys don't have the attention span to read the comic, the movie was really, really well done, and close in some ways, really close in a lot of ways to being true to, the comic. I think that I think the new TV show feels a little bit more like what I always thought the vibe of Watchmen would be, which is this sort of like post-war fear. These characters are more than human, making them dangerous. You know what I mean? All right, so these panels here are Rorschach panels. Just taking out the whites. All right. Take a look at the next one. All right, I'll tell you, this panel right here is the panel that made me want to do the collage. This is a classic piece of Rorschach imagery. Really, really great stuff. This is the page before, which is when he climbs up the side of the building. Very Batman style, right? Throws his line up, which is like a mag hook, and climbs up the side of the building. Elevator might have been quicker. But this panel is the most important panel, I feel like, in the whole, all of our source materials so far. So we definitely want to get this guy out. All right. Same thing we were saying about the white. I used to think this was the most tedious part of this work, but it really isn't. Because you get to go through the book and find like what inspires you to do the work, and that's part of it for me, you know. I can draw and paint and stuff, you know, but I'm a very hard critic on myself, so I often don't feel like I've done as well as I could have, or that kind of stuff. So being able to focus on someone else's artwork is a learning experience for me, and then an influence, that kind of stuff. And the other is that it allows me to create artwork sort of and get it out there without feeling like I haven't done, you know, enough, or my drawing isn't good enough, or my painting isn't good enough. This work by Dave Gibbons is extremely good. We all know is good because he's published, and he's been published for a long, long time. Oh, sorry about that. That is our next reference panel, next page. But these panels here are all Rorschach as well. This is what happens after he climbs into the window. May not use them because they're a little bit hard to see that it's him, but we're going to give it a try. People ask me all the time if I have a really steady hand. I don't think I do at all. I think if you get into a rhythm with cutting, you just get better at it. Like anything, you know what I mean? So here's our next page to see if we need it. This is about the investigation that Rorschach is on. A funny thing is that this is Rorschach right there without his mask, walking around the city with the end is nigh billboard. I think we could use that panel. Alright. Now we just flip over in the back, see if there's anything. Now this panel right here, where someone throws, this panel here, where the character is thrown out the window, is a powerful panel, but has very, very little to do with Rorschach. Same back here, you know, there's just not enough. So we're going to move that to the pile of I don't think we're going to use it, and we're going to stick with this piece here. Just take our whites off. There we go. All right, let's keep going. This is a tremendous shot from this comic. You know, I really, really dig it. Where can I put this? It's not in the way. All right. This is a great page, great drawing, great artwork, some beautiful perspective they did here. And this image here is the iconic image that is the Watchmen symbol. So it's a page that's important to the story, but it is not particularly important to my Rorschach piece. Same here, you know, this is more like about the police discussing what happened to the guy, the character. These next pieces are, this is from the cover of Watchmen. I feel like each issue went up a little until finally it was issue 12 at midnight. So I'm guessing this is 12 minutes to midnight. This will definitely be used because it's an important part of the story. Here's what I was telling you guys about, which is this smiley face with the blood splatter on it. In the comic they say, what is that, bean sauce? And he says, yeah, human bean juice. So I kept this because it has the clocks on it, it has this image, and it has the logo. Logo here is a big part of it, you know what I mean? Sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit. How to use this stuff, I'm not totally sure, but I definitely intend to use them, right? So that is the cover of Watchmen #1. This here, I believe, is more like the cover of Watchmen, looks like maybe like 5 or something like that. This has the same logo, but what's cool is you take a look here, and it gives me the Watchmen in, you know, these logos in 2 separate colors, allowing me to do some effects with that. And the other is that I found this was a reprint of Watchmen, and it had this yellow cover with this drawing of Rorschach on it. So we have a lot of Rorschach source material. So now that we've gone through all of that, you take the stuff that you maybe will use, right? And you place it over on the side. You have some kind of a separator between the stuff you know you're not going to use and the stuff that you might. You could swap, you know, direction or whatever you think. And then we kind of get into some layout, you know. How I work is I lay the collage out as much as I can, and then I take a photograph of that, take all of the collage apart, excuse me, and place it on the surface that we painted black at the beginning. So like I said, this is the same size. I want to tape it down as I did earlier. This is regular painter's tape, nothing special. Never go buy something like painter's tape, or I mean, not traditional painter's tape, but you know, like artist tape or designer's tape, because those things are garbage. They may work awesome, and I'm sure they're designed intentionally for this work, and there's a lot of nice things you could say, but why pay more for something that's inexpensive? You know, the tape I'm using is maybe $2 a roll. It's not expensive. All right. So the next step is to put your cover on your razor before you stick it in your hand. This is a pretty significant consideration since I do it to myself a lot. All right, so now I kind of like lay everything out. There we go. All right, cool. So now you can see around, you know, my desk area here. Got a new light right now. I think it's really, really cool. I totally dig it. There we go. A little bit of extra light, a little lower. Cool. All right, you guys see okay? All right, so the first thing that I do is I lay out all of the artwork around my work surface so that I can see what I have. All right. You can overlap a lot in this process because we just looked at everything and we kind of know what we're going to use and what we're not going to use. But it's good to be able to look at it like this, because it'll help getting your brain wrapped around reinterpreting this work. These panels here where he's breaking into the back of this guy's closet, I'm not sure. They might not be relevant enough. I do have significant amount of things related to that process. So might have to use it because I have some of it. Same thing happening here. That's the whole closet scene. This guy right here, really great, large panel. You can overlap as much as you want, because if you have to look at something, you just pick it up and move it. Okay. Move my endless supply of cables back a little. Everybody else out there got 10 million cables all around them. I feel like I'm forever sliding a bunch of cables out of my way and hoping, you know. All right, so now that we're kind of in we have the paper taped down and stuff, so if there's anything you need to cut in a general sense, like I missed these pieces, it's better to cut them with a scissor now, because you can't use the board the same way. I have an additional small cutting board or cutting surface, and I misplaced it. So you could always do these cuts with the razor, but I sometimes use the big scissors. They do the job pretty well. Hey, hey, hey. Yeah. Can you get me a water? Can you grab me a water from out there? Some kind of cat in my yard torturing my daughter. Alright, so again, we're laying out as many of these pieces as we can. Get me out of the way so you can see what we're doing here. Make sure we keep throwing away our trash. All right. There we go. More white. Keep looking around. Make sure that you've taken all the white, like this one. Another panel, we clean the edges off. All right. This interaction between the bartender and Rorschach is going to seriously get lost without the text. But, you know, alright. No white. And we can add that to the rest of our layout. I wish I could get this shot a little wider just so I could show you guys, but you understand what we're doing is you just continually lay out what you have to try to decide if you want to use it. You know, we're actually just about done that part of it with laying it out. These panels here are the panels just before he walks up to the bartender. This is a great shot of him, but the rest of the interaction I'm not sure. Alright, so now I have all of the source material that I have available to me is laid out in front of me. So now I can do, now we're ready for the next phase, which is to begin trying to figure out what we can do for a collage. And where we're going to ultimately go with it. You know what I mean? So we're going to give it a shot. You ready? All right. So clearly, as I mentioned, this is my key, piece. One of the things I always do when I'm creating a collage is get corner pieces that I would like to work with. They help cover some of the surface that is going to be important, and they make it easier when it comes time to build this. Because when we transition from this to the next one, we're going to have some significant task, you know what I mean? Like, it's the deal. So this next one is pretty big. So what if we tried to fit that one right in here? It's slightly taller even than the paper we're using. So we would just trim it back. I'd have to split the difference because I'd rather not trim out the words "the end is nigh." Who would say that, since I don't think anyone really knows what nigh means. So now we go back to looking around at our many Rorschachs here. And we try to figure out where we're going to go. Got those two big panels in, and we know this is an important panel. We have to take out the text here, but that's it, we're done. This is also a really great Rorschach panel. So he comes into a bar and starts throwing his weight around. Because he's Rorschach and he can do that. So the first one we're going to make some subtle alterations to is going to be this guy. So this guy we're going to take the text off, but we really need it to be a little shorter. So we're going to right across like that. The fact that there's this residual text bubble coming out doesn't really matter. All right. So we need to do the same thing with the Rorschach journal part right here. And we're going to see if we can cover it without having to edit it. All right. This also is an absolutely awesome Rorschach panel. What do we do with all this great Rorschach, you know? Maybe we can see if this guy goes in here a little better. Oh yeah, look at that. It's like he's traveling around the city looking for trouble, which I think he is doing. Don't want to cover this Who Watches the Watchmen, because that's really, really a big part of the story. We're going to make a little alteration in this one. What I did right there is just make a little thumbnail indent on where you want your cut to go, and you can see it just enough. Not sure how straight that was, honestly. The surface that I'm working on here is a grid. So you can line something up along the grid and make sure you cut it straight. There we go. I would say that was a seriously terrible cut just there. So, when all else fails, break out the big guns. This is, of course, a paper cutter. And all we want this guy to do is to give us a good solid 90 cut. Right, just so we can get it real straight. Gotta make sure your blade's over here. Also, it's a little bit difficult to cleanly cut something that's on an edge. Mm-hmm. Just a little piece in there. There we go. All right, so now this panel we had in here. Right. Now you see this here. So I cut that just a little bit too short because it was ragged. And now there's this line up here of white. Now if that was black, probably wouldn't stand out that much, but because it's white, it does. So that's one of the reasons to black all your surfaces, so that it blends in a little better. You find at this point I'm saving really all of the things I'm cutting off because I may need space consumers. Oh. This panel needs a cut too. this cutter is really awesome, which it gives you a tiny wire. Tells you exactly where the blade's going to go. I'm sure you can see one of the really trying parts of collaging in this way is that every time you turn around, cough, sneeze, answer the phone, pick up your drink, you're going to move everything a little bit. So I spend really a lot of time replacing pieces. But I guess that's maybe part of it too. It's like, it's fluid, and the more time it moves around, the more it triggers your creativity, I feel like. All right, so taking a look at this right now, there's a lot of big panels. I have larger boards than the board we painted earlier. This is the next size up, which is 11 by 14. Maybe we should think about trying to do this one on a larger board. Let's take a look at what we got already on a larger board. So we haven't put a lot down, so we can probably get away with putting these few pieces up on here. So if we place this one, that one, see that we got a lot more room to work with here. And if we overlap those like I was doing, and then we can add this guy down here. Look around. So this one is definitely about the bar and about Rorschach's interaction with the people in the bar. This idea. Move these guys over. Who watches the watchmen is the pivotal text in the story. Right, and then we could use one of our watchmen logos here. Let's take a look at this. Pull this guy out. Keep throwing away your stuff. It will totally mess with you if you do not. You will absolutely find that you wish you had. Because too often I go to cut across the cutting board and you notice there's a little tiny piece that you missed, and that screws up the cut.
My dad will be right back. He's, I don't know. Yeah, he's getting things. He's probably getting markers or paint or glue. I don't know though. Could be getting anything. Wonder what he's getting. Could be getting anything. Probably getting markers. No, he's probably getting something. He's gonna come back in a second. He's gonna be back in a second.
Keep talking. Why don't you say something? Yeah, we just stopped. It's supposed to be talking. People are watching you. Sorry about that. My Molly told me she'd cover for me, but apparently not. You get that water?
Why do you need water?
I've been talking for an hour. Alright, so we're going to trim off a little bit of this. Love you too. Oops. Alright. So since the cutter is here, we might as well use it. Get some good 90-degree trim on here. Alright. Grab one more corner. Alright. Alright. Some stuff happening. But like we said, we're gonna take out the text here. I think we'll start with this one. Can't use all of that, covers too much of our artwork. But I don't think we need it all. You know what I mean? So we're going to take a look in here. Now this panel right here has Rorschach approaching the guy. I think that we could take out the distant image of Rorschach because he's just far enough away. So then we have this panel here, which is where Rorschach is really coming up to the guy. Kind of the bar scene happening here. Alright, now this one, we need to cut out our text. But we don't want to cut out all of the writing. Okay. So now we got this panel section of Rorschach approaching this bartender. Let me take this one out. There's a lot of this type of back and forth, you know, like we're going to go through and trim this and trim that and move this and move that. And, you know, because what I'm trying to do is to kind of sneak up on the artwork that I want, you know, that the design that I want to do. I don't like, you know, I feel like when you're a painter, some painters, in your head, you have an image, you know. One of my favorite artists, Bernie Wrightson, said that in his head he would see a drawing and his hand would produce that drawing every single time. What? That's totally not fair. The rest of us regular people don't get to do that. So Not fair, not fair. Too bad we lost this panel in the back. Kind of looks sort of crazy. See that? He comes up to the guy, but here he's broken the guy's finger. Thank you. Talking for an hour will get on top of you, I'll tell you. Alright, so for a sec, we'll move back our cutter out of the way and take a look again at where we are. Rorschach approaching the bartender, him having a breakdown. Going to have to trim down a bit more there. And then we have this scene here, where I think this first panel, I don't think we need that. Just going to trim this over here on the edge. I'm sorry you guys can't really see that. All right. And then it kind of fits, you know, we go 3 to 2 to 2. Let's see, what else do we have to work with here? There's this whole scene where Rorschach goes through this guy's closet and finds out he is the comedian. Don't know how relevant that would be to the story, and it's too complicated to just fit in easily. So I don't know what we're going to be able to do with that. I think we're going to keep it to this scene about the bar. Maybe we can cheat these 2s down. I think we'll take this guy out too. Although Rorschach is standing there, he might be better somewhere else. So now we're down to 2 here too. All right. Alright, so we got some of these panels happening. Some good stuff going on. Right. So a lot of it is trying to figure out where to place something that is consistent with something else and doesn't take away too much of something else. You know, like this panel here, my motivation panel, you don't want that panel to be covered by everything around it, but you also want it to fit in relation to the other things. And to hopefully tell, again, the story of Rorschach getting to this character in a bar. Here's kind of an interesting piece right here. This is the back of one of the panels that we cut out. It has some really scared people on it. Sometimes I like to leave a little bit of text because it says something about the character. So this is a good last panel You know what I mean? This panel here, I don't know if you guys can see that one. It's basically Rorschach has broken this dude's finger, and so this panel and this one go pretty well together. So I'm just going to go in here and trim off all the text. The white panel line on the edge has a little bit more text. There's a great line right here. He says, "This city is dying of rabies. It's the best I can do to wipe foam, flecks of foam from its lips." Boy, if that isn't a Watchmen line, I don't know. A Rorschach line, I don't know what it is. All right. So now we got the guy. We're closing in on down here. Where's the panels of him walking up to this guy? Nope. I'll also point out that I lose so much artwork that it's silly. I often think it's under what I'm working on. It rarely is. I often think it's on the floor. It rarely is. All right. Looks like by using these two panels, I have lost the opportunity to use the panels where he walks up on the guy. I definitely didn't think that was the deal. I thought I had a bit left. Here we're taking out the text, but as best I can to leave our character Rorschach. Can't cover the text because it's text. Alright. So now we're kind of demanding a shift in directionality in the concept of what we're doing here. Sometimes this creates an issue, sometimes not. This panel here of him sitting reading pretty much goes with this panel here. Again, I hate to lose the sky just to remove the text, but sometimes there's nothing you can do. You know what I mean? If you overlap a bit, you make it help with the transition from one clip to the next. We're going to go through and remove all the white that are in there in just a sec. This piece, same, we're removing the text. This particular one had a bar window in it, so it gives us something to trim along the side of. This one here, damn! There we go. This guy had a little trim up the edge. All right. So this is Rorschach asking the bartender where this particular guy is after scaring the hell out of him, I think. Some of the other patrons a little shocked to see Rorschach. Keep throwing your offcuts away, very important. All right. Right. Kind of want this guy to move up under here a little so that we get a little bit more Rorschach, but we're not sweating his hand or sweating this panel here that we want to bring in. Right. So now the question is, how do we deal with that transition right there? Not totally sure. We got to think of something. Let's try this. This time we're going to cut our whites off. Got a good back shot of Rorschach walking away there. A couple of these shots of him walking up dark alleys and stuff are pretty awesome. And it'll really help in some transitions. I feel like I say that word entirely too much. But it is what it is. Actually, I do not want to quote that particular quote. These pieces for a sec. I like this shot right here behind this guy. Definitely like what's happening right there. I get our little bit of the edge. So I want these last two panels to stand alone. And I want this one to cheat under these guys so that it lives there. So we got some coverage going. We got a story happening. We're just pulling out the piece where he begins the investigation. I think that's very, very cool. Now what we're hurting for is some information for some of these locations here. Like here, here, you know what I mean? These are some places that have to get their pieces. Okay. We keep poking around. Take this one and move it up here. All right, now we're going to grab a couple of these guys. Take the text off. Okay. So we decide if this wandering off panel here at the end says enough or not. We have more walking off panels. Seems like one of the things Rorschach does best is wander off and say things like Herm. I don't know. So this bottom panel here, I think is what we're going to leave there. This one, I think we're going to cut down. Let's see where we can fit it. Not bad. Some stuff happening that's cool. This guy we need. Whoops.